Greetings, greetings, greetings. Welcome back to another episode of Joy in the Morning podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for tuning in. I'm really excited about the conversation that's going to be had in this episode. I have a guest, a very dear friend of mine, and the conversation gets very, very real, like capital REAL, real. But before we get into all that, if it is your first time listening, welcome to Joy in the Morning. If it's not your first time, welcome back once again. Just very grateful that you're listening, very grateful that you're here, a part of these conversations that we're having on Joy in the Morning. As I said, today's conversation does get really real, so I hope you're down for a very open, vulnerable, and honest ride. Some of the things that we talk about are a little sensitive, so listen, carefully at your own discretion. Feel free. This may be an episode you need to pause, process some things, whatever you got to do, but it's something that I hope you make it all the way through to the end, because it is a little bit of a long episode, but there's just a lot of vulnerable moments, a lot of truth being shared. So I hope that you do get to make it through the whole thing. Just wanted to put that disclaimer out there, but I'm not going to hold off any longer because it is a long episode and it's really honest, and I want you to get all of the truth and just hear our hearts, hear our stories, and I hope it blesses you. I hope the vulnerability blesses you, and I hope you know that these are the type of conversations the Joy in the Morning is all about. It's just being really real, being really raw, being really transparent, and sharing your story. And here we go. Greetings. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Immediate laughter. I love it. I'm excited. I have a guest here. She's a dear friend, Fiona. Not that I forgot your name, but I had so many thoughts immediately when I said dear friend that then I was like, what am I actually saying right now? But wonderful guest here, Fiona Sim. We met at church when I first started coming to church here, where I go now, City Church, Chicago. I was in an interesting place in life. I wasn't necessarily looking to get back into church. I came simply because someone asked me to play the bass. And Fiona was one of there were a few people that immediately made me feel welcome and like I belonged. And Fiona was one of those people. And so I'm very excited to have her here, share her story, share her faith journey, and her testimony, essentially, right? Yeah, we overcome. But so I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have. Thank you, Fiona, for being here. Thank you for making me feel welcomed. I think that's a gift that you have. You have the gift to see people and not just see them, but encourage them and speak life into them. And so I'm excited for you to do that here on the podcast, but I am beyond grateful for the impact that had on my life. So,
hi, everyone. This is Fiona. And thank you for those really, really kind words. And for having me. I'm so excited. I'm a big, big fan of Joy in the Morning and that great intro. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and I told her, I was like, I love your podcast, love everything you're doing. Can I please be on it?
I was like, yes. Immediately.
And
yes.
Now I'm here. So
yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Honestly, it's my honor, to have you here. And yeah, I'm just super excited about diving in here. So I'm not gonna wait. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what's life like for you right now.
Yeah, so I'm a working mom. So I
Shout
have
out to the working moms.
Whew, yeah, I do have two younger kids.
Yeah.
But I'm also working. I've got my own office in a corporate scene, and really, me and Joy met at church. I'm still serving at the church, and really all I'm doing is going after what God's called me to do, being faithful to that. And part of that is coming out, showing up, and sharing my testimony. So that's really, why I'm here. But I know there's lots about my life that we can get into.
Yeah. Start off telling us just a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in faith? Did you grow up in church? Did you not grow up in church? What was your introduction to faith, but also how did you, what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that influenced my upbringing was being a first generation American. So both my parents, they immigrated from Indonesia, and so that is a country that is like 99.999% Muslim.
Yeah.
So it's crazy that I'm Christian and that we came out here, but at the same time, growing up was very difficult because the cultures were just so different.
Yeah.
And it's not even being my parents are Christian, and it's not that, but it's just the way that they were raised, because they grew up in an Islamic atmosphere, influence kind of their perspective on life. It was just really hard. I was an only child growing up, and my parents had to work. They both worked like 3 jobs each, just trying to prepare to provide for me. So it was very, very lonely growing up. And it was just like the expectation of, we only have one kid, and, she's our beloved daughter. So they have an expectation of how that's gonna, of how that's gonna go. Yeah. And I was not by any means the perfect daughter to them. I was a little bit chaotic. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Please forgive me. Yeah.
Chaotic.
Yeah. And part of the hard part was, them being Christian. I felt like sometimes they, put that on me, saying hey, this isn't the Christian way to do it, when I necessarily didn't agree with that, where I didn't see it as a Christian or not Christian thing, as opposed to I want to do things this way because this is the American way. This is how I was how I grew up. So there was a lot of tension in my home. I was a latchkey kid. so my parents worked all the time. No, really. And I just dove into trouble. I was like, well, if I can't satisfy this expectation that you have for me, that I'm sorry, is way too high. And you already think that, that I'm not great of a kid. Okay, this is what I am. This is what I identify as. Yeah. Right. And so growing up in school, I moved a lot. And so I didn't know how to make friends. And so I would do anything to make a friend, really. And absolutely. Peer pressure was high. And, that led to a lot of crazy things. Got into the wrong crowd really early, middle school. And it just kind of went from there. Till my breaking point. But it was.
So it was a cultural tension in your home, because their cultural norms stem from where they came from, Indonesia, and then you're being raised here in America and learning American culture, and learning it not necessarily based on their terms, right? Because if they're working all the time, then you're just learning from the environments you're in at school, being around your friends. So culturally, there's your outlook or view on life is different from theirs, and then of course there is then you throw the Christian expectation on there, and it's just what's happening? You guys are just not seeing eye to eye.
No, we fought a lot. Home life was a bit chaotic as well, and it's I grew up Christian, so it's okay, I know all the Christian things, I know Jesus. But and you have to learn that faith for yourself and what that means. But I think one of the greatest pressures was being a woman, that I have no control over that, because their culture in Islam, it's patriarchal. And so, my father is the firstborn son. And so, he gets all the inheritance, all the responsibilities are on him. He goes off, does his own thing in America, everyone's supporting it. But at the same time, the family's lonely because we're the only ones out here. And I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child. And so for me, it's okay, now I'm a woman. And so I have this American freedom, right? That I have, the world is my oyster. I can do whatever I want. Yet it feels slightly repressed in my home life, because I can't choose for myself. It's being chosen for me.
And so then you get out.
And then I just go crazy.
Making every choice I can. This is my time.
And that led to a lot of bad decisions. And I think one of my biggest struggles growing up was struggling with lust. And so, you know, one of the things that I think of automatically in this conversation of getting power, of having control, is that like I thought in that owning my sexuality was a way to control the situation as a woman, when that's not the case at all. You think, oh yeah, right, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I definitely got into some really bad situations. Like, for example, I know that this is like no laughing matter, but this is how crazy my life was. Okay?
I laugh at all types of things. Even when it's like, I'm the person that laughs when it's like the most inappropriate time to laugh. It's also like, that's a coping mechanism to me. It's like when someone's talking about something like really traumatic, sometimes I feel really bad because I'm like, I'm empathizing with you. Like, I'm there, but also like, this is how I can like cope and continue to have this conversation, is by laughing. So
yeah. I mean, this is also looking back at it. So to me, it's no longer traumatic that I'm able to talk about it. But so I met R. Kelly.
Oh.
So I guess that is, you know.
Say less. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. So the point being is that, like, you know, I was hanging around people that were hanging around R. Kelly. And I mean, I think that says something in itself, the kind of people that I was hanging out with, that like I just put myself in danger. Literally, there's so many times where I could have died. No, seriously, that I could have died.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but I didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, you know, me being 18, thinking like, oh, me showing off as being experienced or knowing what I'm talking about gives me control, when really, no, there's just a bunch of people that are messed up in the world just taking advantage of you.
Yes, I've been there. But you, like, you think you have control. Like, it's like, no, I'm in control of the situation, but then like you don't realize how much you don't have control until usually like when you're in that frame of mind, then and in that space, it takes like being in a situation where you realize you have no control. And I don't want to say someone has played you, but that's kind of like the feeling you get. It's like when reality hits and it's like, oh, like actually I have no control over the situation. And while I thought I knew what I was doing, I'm actually just at the mercy of someone else. And now I need to like figure out how I'm going to get from under this like person's thumb, so to speak, and then like try to like get back to a place of safety, or get back to a place where I feel like I have some control over, like, saying control over my life feels dramatic, but that's what it feels like in the moment. So
I mean, yeah, essentially it's like, well, I want to control my life. I want to control the outcome, you know, because I felt, you know, oppressed by my parents or oppressed by people that took advantage of me. So me gaining control was trying to find these other outlets. And, you know, like I'm saying, like, definitely there were men in my life that took advantage of me. And so, like, for me to get on top of it, so I would be the one in control, would be like, well, I'm going to hurt whoever it is before they hurt me. And it doesn't even matter if they're a bad person or not. It's just like, you know, even people like do that now with ghosting. It's like, I don't want to be involved in this if I already see the hurt coming.
So
right.
I'm gone.
Yeah. And so, like, to me, you know, I I did some pretty nasty, pretty mean things, right, to people that didn't deserve it at all, because I couldn't see myself in a good relationship, in a committed relationship. I never had hope or an expectation for anything good happening my way. I just, again, I identified so well with like being a black sheep. That's like, okay, well, this is what I am.
I'm fully committed to this. Like, I'm going to double down. You
know, and I don't know why we think that that's taking control when really you're just diving more into
brokenness, essentially.
Really?
If you want to, like, be honest about it. What, there was something you said just now, like, I've drawn a blank. But, like, what, I guess, like, what made you lean more into that? Because I feel like when you're in that place where you're like, you know, I'm a black sheep, there are like two responses. It's either like, I'm going to do everything I can, like you said, to like, you know, be accepted, to make friends, to have approval. Or there's this thing of like, I'm going to lean super into being like the black sheep and just lean super into this place of like, kind of like rebelliousness, right? Of being like, okay, like I'm going to like just attach this to my identity. And like, what pushed you more toward that? Like, was it like simply like the influence of like your parents, or was it just like also like dealing with rejection that like you were like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go all the way this way?
Rejection definitely was a big part of it. and it took a toll on, my outlook on life.
Of course, yeah.
But, like you can have one perspective of it, like this is who I think that I am, trying to figure out who you are. But also, another component of that is people literally telling you that you're no good, that you're crap.
I've done that,
So I
yeah.
definitely had that, and not just like physical abuse, but like emotional,
Yeah. I've been
mental.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been there. Growing up, I was everyone in my family, like in my immediate family, but even like kind of like my extended family, the people I would see in my life the most, like my cousins, my aunt, my grandma, like everyone had this sense of sort of identity. Like my grandma was really big and influential in Mary Kay, so she's like the Mary Kay woman, right? And then like my cousins, they were all like very book smart, like all of them A's and B's, like, and their mom was not super like on them about their grades, like I don't even know if she checked in to see if they did their homework, like, but they were just like, so like, they're brilliant, like all of them, like, and like my brother's a drummer, like from the age of 3 could play the drums, like not a single lesson needed, and like immensely talented. My mom is like, an educator and a businesswoman. Like before she had me and my brother, she was working for like FedEx corporate and was like making a lot of money and like very integral in what they were doing there. My dad was a mechanic, but he's also very creative. And then there was me, and I was just like, hey. I didn't have anything about me that was like easily distinguished. Like, you know what I mean? I just was like loud. Everyone was always telling me to like be quiet, like, you know what I mean? And I was a little bit of a wild child as well. So I was just out there, doing whatever. Like I'm much of a free spirit, so whatever I feel like is fun or gonna bring me happiness or gonna be cool, like that's what I'm gonna do. And there were so many times that people were like, "Oh, you're trouble," like, you know what I mean, or just like always kind of like shutting me down. And so that like the breeding grounds I'm trying to say of like rejection in my life, where I always just felt like everywhere I was, there was always something like, Joy, no, you're too much, or like you shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that, like. And so like even like when I started making friends, like they would tell me like you're too much, or like, or like, and kids can be mean or kids can be cruel. And so like I just always seemed to like be the butt of the joke, or like, and I even had that tension like in my family with some of my cousins when I was talking about they're really smart. Like we're all like really close and like super good now, but like when I was younger, like I was like they were making fun of me all the time, and like we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so like I also got made fun of for like what I was wearing and like just like not being cool, and just like there was so much judgment that I was like, oh, like I just fell deep into that of like, wow, like leaning into the rejection, and just immediately like I just learned to like count myself out before anyone else could, and just be like, like everyone else is pretty much like telling me this, and I just need to accept it as true. And there was no affirmation in my home of like, some parents are like, that's not true, honey. You're the best.
Some
like,
parents, yeah.
I didn't have that. It was like, no, Joy, you're doing too much of this, and this. And so like, I relate to that of just like being pushed down. Like, and it's like, I got to the point where I'm like, anyone that accepted me, anyone that offered me like the tiniest bit of encouragement, even if it wasn't really encouragement, if it just like seemed good, then I was like, okay, I want to be over here. And then I learned that like not everyone that accepts you, not every space that is accepting of you is good for you. I didn't learn that till years later, like 15, 20 years later, So I definitely relate to that. But you did speak of like saying like lust was like a big thing for you, as far as like like gaining this need of control, like that your like controlling your sexuality like was something that was like key to you feeling like you were in control of you. How did you get there? And like how did that, I guess 2 questions, because you also said like your parents were in church ish, right? Like, so it's like, how did you feel any conflict in that? Like, in like the trouble you were getting into and like the decisions you were making? Like, did you feel conflict because of like your parents being people of faith, you potentially being a person of faith, or was it very separate? Were you like, my parents are churchgoers and like they are Christians, but like I'm not? Like, what was that like?
So
That was a big question.
so let me start with this, right? Identity was like a big thing for me, right? Because people are putting me into this box, telling me, or grooming me, this is, how you should be to be a good kid, or, if you want to be a cool kid, this is what you do, right? And so you have a lot of people, a lot of voices telling you, what you are or how you should be, that you're not good enough. And, this is like a hard time, like in a adolescence. Yeah. It's a hard time growing up and trying to figure out, okay, who am I actually?
Yeah.
And so I know that for a lot of people, they always had a coming out story.
Yeah.
Right. And made a big deal. And they really identify with like, okay, this is who I am. Yeah. And so you asked me who I am. And that's really hard for me to say because I've never had a coming out. I guess this is my coming out.
Yeah.
Applause.
Yeah.
Because I was telling Joy specifically this when she had first said that, like, hey, I want to put this podcast out, like, and I'm like, I support you like 100%, like, this is an amazing thing that you're doing, coming out with your testimony, but I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to be vulnerable and just say it, right? So for me, I never had felt the need to come out because I've always, and I'm thankful that I've always felt accepted by the people in my life. So my parents, my friends, like they all knew and they all loved me anyway. So I did feel that support where unfortunately some people don't. And so having that identity, sometimes you really like tie yourself to it. It's like, this is who I am. Yeah. Right. And like labeling it. Yeah. So I didn't necessarily like feel that, but okay. So going back, big question, right? Sorry. So with me moving around a lot, growing up, it would be like my fun fact saying like, oh, I went to a different school every year, which is very hard. Yeah, realistically,
it's like, and you're deep down inside, you're like, I just want to stay in one place and make friends. Yeah.
Seriously, commitment was very hard for me, and I also had like kids making fun of me. So it's of course like like you want to feel the sense that you belong, feel the sense that you are accepted, of course, for the very fundamental human that you are, whatever that is. Yeah. So anyway, I knew from a very young age that I like girls. Yeah. So I'm whatever you want to label it, bi, pan, whatever, right? Yeah. I never felt the need to say, right? Yeah. But it wasn't, quote, normal, at the time or like accepted, especially like now, in the Christian community. Yeah. Now it's different.
Now, I don't know, like kids have it so good, but like, I feel so old saying like 20, 30 years ago, but it's true. Like, that was such a taboo thing, but also no one would ever openly like talk about their sexuality. Like the expectation was that like you're straight. Yeah, that's just what it is. Like women like men, men like women. End of story. Like we're around the same age. Yeah. 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 So like that was the expectation. Like in your parents' eyes or like anyone else, no one, like now it's normal to like you meet someone or you see someone and it's normal to like, maybe ask like, what are your pronouns or, whatever, or ask about how they identify. Right. But like when we were growing up, that was not the expectation. And I can relate to that. Like, I don't have like a coming out story of like, and then I sat everyone down and told them that I liked girls. Like it was just like something that I feel like I kind of knew at a young age, but then I kind of like pressed it down and I was like, that's not true, because the norm around me was like, you like boys. And there were like guys I had a crush on, but like I never felt like super drawn to like a guy. And then I remember when I went to high school, even then, like I like freshman year, like started dating this guy, right? And it was funny. He was like locker buddies with my brother. And then I started dating him. My brother was like, no, he's not a good guy. Like, you need to break up with him. I'm like, I thought you said he was nice. But like, I feel like toward the end of my high school journey, like things maybe, I don't want to say got confusing for me, but I was just like, I realized that I was different, like, and that there was something about me that connected more with women than men. And I remember, I think it was my freshman year, my mom, she like accused me of like, me and my friends were being silly and taking like pictures at school. Nothing about the photos were sexual, but she saw those photos and was like, do you like girls? Like, are you gay? Like, blah, blah. And I was like, I literally was like crying and I was like, no, why would you think that of me? Like, you know what I mean? Cause in my time growing up, like that was like wrong. And especially being Christian, double wrong.
Yeah.
And it just like never, like my sexual identity, like that never occurred to me. And like, I never was like, oh, I need to like pick a side, and I also never practically thought about like, oh, I actually like women. I just noticed, and it wasn't until like later, like years after that I was like, oh, I think there is something in me that like is drawn more toward women than men. And so, and I've also never like super openly talked about this on the podcast, so I'm glad we're having this conversation.
It's bound to happen, right?
Yeah, and it's been on my mind. I'm like, oh, I feel like I need to like just plainly talk about this. Like, I think I've mentioned it, but anyway, but yeah, I don't know. I never had this defining coming out moment, but I remember when it kind of like dawned on me, and then I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh no, like it just made me feel like I was just like even more, I don't want to say pushed back, but like set apart, but not in the good way than everyone else. It like further confirmed like all the other things in me, but like I can relate to that. And like, thankfully, like you were able to like have people that supported you and accepted you. I just was like, well, I'm just not going to tell anybody. But I didn't mean to interrupt.
Continue. Yeah, and obviously that can add in like a Christian atmosphere where you feel even worse about yourself because it feels like this is something that I don't have control over necessarily, right? Yeah. Like I've heard that depending on your personality, there are different types of personalities that have a temptation for certain things. Yeah. And I guess this is my burden to bear. Like
the thorn in my side.
Yeah. Like I don't have a choice. Like this is, right, I was born this way, or this is what I lean toward. Like this is the temptation that I have to bear. But I knew from a very young age, like when I was 5, I was already leaning towards homosexuality. When I was 10, I was already, trying to explore that. That's kind of when I also got addicted to porn. And I was addicted to porn for like 20 years.
Oh, like wow. Yeah.
Deep addiction. Just coming out of that curiosity, right? Because it's not something we talk about, right? It's
especially in the church,
it's hush hush.
It's like dirty thing of like you mention it. You can literally be asking for help, and someone like, no. Just pray, and you're like, I need help,
and you and then
talk to me,
and it feels that you can't pray the gay way, and that's I feel really bad for people that feel that they have to change who they are. For God to be able to accept them because, well, God knows how he created you. The world's imperfect and, temptation and sin exists, but, his love is not any less, he knows completely. And so I understand that struggle of feeling like I'm a terrible person because of this one thing.
I feel that. I can relate to that. Yeah.
And it's like, does God still love me? But anyway, I was addicted for a really long time, and it was a very, very deep. It had a very deep hold on me.
Sorry. How did you get introduced to porn? Like, did you discover it on your own? Did someone at school like introduce you to it? Like,
it sounds crazy because I started when I was 10, but I think I just found it on my own. Yeah. Really. And
no, that doesn't sound crazy. I mean, also the internet was booming at that time.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah. And again, like no one's answering questions. No one wants to talk about it. Yeah. They just feel uncomfortable and push it down. So what else, do you feel like you can do? Like where else can you go? Yeah. Right. Unfortunately, the internet, Google. And so, I just knew that it was like very like a cascading, like it was like being addicted to anything. And I've been addicted to other things as well.
Yeah.
Like this is the biggest thing that has had a hold on me. Like, again, 20 years, and it's just like one thing led to another thing, led to another thing.
Yeah.
And this is not just like my secret life, like at home, like this is like evading into my relationships with people, right?
Yeah.
And like, I knew how bad this was because literally a friend told me saying, how can you spend 12 hours?
Oh, 12 hours. Glory to God.
Stop. Yeah, we're about to have a lot of fun today.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
But really, like, I would not sleep like all night. Like, this is how bad it was for me. And it was just like, it's like being addicted to drugs. It's like, okay, let me get the next thing because I'm not getting high enough of the normal. Right?
Yeah.
And it led to very, very weird, very dark things. Like, I'm going to tell you, like, if you can find anything in the internet if you keep going far enough, and
this is true. Yeah.
If you hang out on the internet too much, it's very dark.
Yeah.
A very dark space that you don't want to be in.
Yeah.
And like, I don't even know, right?
Find yourself
it's
there,
you find yourself being like, what am I even looking at? Like, why is this even like,
why is this pleasing to me?
This is R. Kelly raw, right? You know what I mean? Like, how does someone like that get to where they are?
Yeah.
They don't jump to that all of a sudden, right?
It's so just like you said, one thing leads to another. And I think with anything that you become addicted to, like and in your mind, when you're at the entry point of this, whatever your thing is, like whether it be porn, drugs, alcohol, whatever, we always have like a stopping point in our mind. Like, I will never go this far, right? But as you said, it's like a high. It's like, okay, like you're always looking for like one step more. It's like, because it's never satisfying. Like the only thing that truly satisfies is God. So then when you have something, again, porn, drugs, whatever it may be, and that doesn't satisfy, you're always looking for a little bit more because you're looking for that point of satisfaction. And the thing is, since it doesn't satisfy, you're just like going deeper and deeper into this hole. But I do want to go back to one thing you said. You said it was like affecting your relationships. Like, when did you notice that it was affecting your relationships, and what impact was it having?
Well, I think it ties back to control. So I felt like when I would like go out with girls, right? It was me trying to get control because it's like, well, I'm taken advantage by men. So I don't want anything to do with men. Let me hurt someone else before I get hurt. So I'm going to prey on the weak, which is really messed up when you think about it. And when you like start looking at, the way the world views sex and porn, really they're treating someone like they're not even a human at that point. They're taking that much advantage of a person.
That's true.
And that's not like, a healthy way to live your life. And so I did come to that realization when I was, seeing other women, that's really the root of it. That it wasn't healthy at all. It was just like full lust, whatever I can get out of it, and it was very unhealthy. So that's what I'm saying. It was those really, really dark evils that was affecting, the way that I saw it. And I never, again, I always thought very terrible things about myself. I always thought, I'm never going to get married. No one's ever going to love me. Like having a family, like no way. I'm destined for an imperfect, family life, a broken family life.
Just like expecting to settle for like the bare minimum of what life has to offer because that's what you feel. Like, I mean, I've been there, and like, I feel like I'm just now like starting to like expect more for my life. Like for me, like I also like I struggled with being addicted to porn for a while, and like it was, I don't even remember how I got introduced to it. I don't know if it was like my brother or someone left it up on the computer at home, or like I just remember like the first time I saw it, I was just like very intrigued because I feel like I was sexualized at a very young age. Like sex was such a hot topic when I was younger. That it was like starting to be like more sexual forward things were like on TV and like things like that. And there was also like a younger guy that was like friends of our family. Like, you have families that have kids and like your parents are friends with them and the kids are all close. Like, I remember he was a little bit older than me, but he, like, if we were ever hanging out alone, like, he would kiss me. And like, I wasn't even, again, like aware sexually of like anything. Right. And then like that led to other things. And I remember like the first time I think I like saw a sex scene in a movie or something, and I didn't realize how like bad this was until I got older, because I also like really suppressed that memory. But I remember thinking like, oh, why didn't he do that with me? Like, if this is what people that love each other do. And like, I was so young, like I didn't realize like, hey, we're not in love. Like, this is a messed up situation. Like, I'm like, oh, he's going to be my boyfriend. Like, you know, not happening. Did not happen. And so like that, like, I think like I got more curious about like seeing like, oh, like this, like people functioning in this way. And again, it's not talked about, like people don't talk about sex. And so I was like, oh, like for me, it was almost like a point of education. I was like, oh, I can learn something. And then it just like grew this like lust thing inside of me. And then I just kind of like, I knew that porn was bad. I don't know how I knew. I just knew, like, you know. And so but I pushed down what happened. Like, I never thought about it. And I remember, like, decades later, my mom had asked me a couple of times, like, did something happen to you? Did someone ever, like, touch you? And, like, I was just like, no. And I genuinely meant it. Like, I had never thought about that. And then, like, it literally within the last few years, like all these thoughts just came back to me, like, these memories. And I was like, someone did touch me, like, you know, and like something did happen to me. I just didn't think about it. And I had just pressed it down so much, but it led me to this like sexual curiosity. And so like anytime, like when I was younger, I didn't start dating women until I was like older, literally like 21. In high school, like I think it was my senior year, there were some friends I had that they were kind of like sexually fluid, I guess you could say. I remember like hanging out with some friends, and we were in like this guy's car. I think he was like taking us to buy alcohol. We were supposed to be at like a school revival because I went to a Christian school, and like we ditched the revival. We were hanging out with this guy. I think it was like a friend's brother, and he was like taking us to the store to buy alcohol. And my friend was in the car, and she was like, we're all bi. And I was like, ew, no, we're not. And then like a couple months later, I was like, no, I think we are. Like, you know, but like, I remember like we were all like super close, super touchy feely. And then there was one girl in particular who we got really close. And then like, I remember her telling me like, I really like you. Like, I want to kiss you. And I was like, yeah, let's kiss, you know? And like, I remember thinking like, I don't know, like I knew it was wrong, but at the same time it felt normal. So I was like, oh, like this is fine. But then like something in me knew that it wasn't fine, or like felt that it wasn't fine. Then like, if you wanted to be more physical in public or like around other people. And because of like, you know, we went to a private Christian school, there were also not very many opportunities for us to hang out one-on-one or things like that. So like any opportunity we had, we took to kind of like explore, I guess you could say. But it just like all was mixed in this bag for me. And like anytime I was not able to explore with someone else, then I was also like, I was turning to pornography. And I was super ashamed about watching pornography. It was also like a deep, deep secret. Like, I don't think I ever openly like confessed. Like once I got more friends that were, in Christian terms, were worldly, but just more friends that were not a part of the Christian community, right? And they would talk openly about like sex or pornography. Like, I just had so much shame that I couldn't even say like, oh, like me too. And, or like, you know, they would talk about like, yeah, oh, this is like my favorite porn star. This is like my favorite like thing to watch. And I would just be like, oh no. But like later that night, I'm like on Google, like, you know, and I remember like just feeling so shameful about it, and then like trying to figure out why I could not be honest, like even with people that were willing to be open. Mm-hmm. And it led me to this place of like, I would just like be super shameful. Like, you know, how it goes is like you watch porn and then you like kind of feel bad about it. So then you're like, oh, like now I feel gross, like, you know, and you feel shame, and then you think like, I'm going to do better tomorrow. And then like a few hours later, like it's not even tomorrow yet. You're just like back in the cycle, you know? And I found myself there a lot. And it took me a while that like, I had to be honest with myself and admit like, I have a problem. Like I have to stop. Like, cause it like, yeah, it would get in the way of things where I was like, oh, I'm supposed to like be getting ready for like church or school or something. And I'm just like on my phone looking at porn, like, and I should be like doing homework or, you know, whatever. And it's like my attention was not on the things that maybe it should have been on. I was just looking for another point of satisfaction or another point of like exploring something that I felt like I didn't have access to. So like I can relate to that, like feeling that need of like, okay, like I'm what I can't get from like a person, like I can get like on my own,
Right.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, growing up, I felt very lonely. Like my parents were,
Yeah.
right, always out of the house, you know, and so you want to find friends however you
Yeah.
can, or a relationship
Yeah.
to fill that gap of loneliness,
Yeah.
right? And so, right, you're saying like, okay, well, if I don't have anyone that wants to stick around in a relationship or someone
Yeah.
in person, it's like, well, okay, I guess this kind of makes me feel not
Yeah.
lonely.
Yeah, yeah. But it also does make you feel like you're in control because, like, I'm in control of when I feel good and when I don't feel good. I'm in control of when, like, it's something that you feel like you have control over. But then, like, the deeper you go into it, the more you realize it has control over you.
Yeah.
And I feel like once I started realizing, like, oh, like, this is really, like, spilling over into other areas of my life, and I was like, I don't have control over this thing. Like, it's controlling me. But then because of, like, being in church and all these other things, I was like, I can't go for help. Like, I can't ask anyone for help about this. Like, I can't go to anyone. And I had, like, really good people and, like, mentors in my life. But again, being in that church context, like, I remember when I was really struggling about, like, okay, I know that I like women, like, but I also have this, like, feeling that, like, it's very wrong, but, like, and I don't want to do the wrong thing, like, even though I was always, you know, pegged as, like, being bad or too much or whatever, like, I still deep down inside had a desire to be good, but I just felt like I had no access to being good or, like, access to, like, really talking about what that looked like practically for me. I also didn't have the language to have that type of conversation because of how young I was and just how I was also very shy and, like, all these other things. But I remember I got to this point where I was like, I want to talk to someone about this because I don't want this to take over my life, but I felt like there was nowhere to go. So then I just turned deeper into watching porn, turned deeper into, like, finding people to chat with on the internet that, like, you know, that are going to make me feel accepted and really, like, they just want me probably, like, for sex or whatever. And I'm just, like, looking for a connection because I'm like, oh, like, clearly we're here on the same topic. So, like, you're going to provide what I'm looking for, but really it's not accepting me for me. You're accepting me because of what you could potentially get from me, right? And I remember especially when I was like, okay, like, I feel like I need to talk to someone about my sexuality, I was, like, terrified. I was like, there's no one to talk to. And, like, at that time, the church I grew up in, I was also watching people be, like, sat down because, like, their sexuality was discovered. And then I'm in, like, in the group of trusted counsel when they're like, can you believe so-and-so? Yeah, we had to talk to them about this, this, and this. And I'm just sitting there like, I will never say anything because they were also, like, there was so much negativity and condemnation that was like, you're going to totally reject me in the space where I feel like, in the space where, like, you know, I feel somewhat accepted on the faith side of things. Like, if you find out who I really am or what I'm really into, then, like, I'm done. Like, I'm toast. And so I was just, like, constantly just, like, suppressing and, like, pushing everything down. And I, like, slowly but surely it started to come out because you can only push things down for so long. But I remember just being like, I don't know where to go with any of this stuff. Like, how did you get to the point where it was something that you were open with your parents and, like, with your community? How were you able to, like you said, you didn't really have a coming out moment, but, like, what was that when your parents realized, oh, like, you're not interacting with men, you're interacting with women? Like, how did that go for you?
I think my parents were concerned about a lot of other things.
Okay.
That this was not one of their
Yeah.
top concerns. Because
Yeah.
I was also meeting people on the internet, hanging out with people that I shouldn't be,
Yeah.
where they were good parents. They were
Yeah.
concerned about my safety.
Yeah.
And physically hurting yourself, right?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
I was addicted to drinking alcohol or,
Yeah.
so they were really worried about my health. So that's how it came about. Like, they were angry with me for sure. Like,
Yeah.
they'd be like, you're grounded for, going out all night and
Yeah.
doing all these things,
Yeah.
right? But, oh, yeah, you were with the girl, whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So,
okay.
so they were mad at me for a lot of things, but they knew this
They're
about
like,
me.
They're like, that's secondary.
Yeah.
You've been drunk for 4 days. It doesn't matter. You're with a woman. Like, we need you to
That's
be
what I'm
sober.
saying, that
we need
like
to get your liver checked. Yeah.
I had a pretty
Okay.
good pass at that, but
Okay.
it does bring it back to growing up in church.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first relationship that I had
Yeah.
was with a guy who was Christian,
Mm-hmm.
had a wonderful family, super nice guy. We went to church together, and it was everything about like a first love, right? Except that it doesn't last usually,
yeah.
And so I was super heartbroken about that. But the hardest part about that was feeling like I no longer had Christian friends because his friends were my friends, right? And, being part of the church is like, we want to still all be friends, hopefully.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
felt like I myself was very cast out, where he continued having all of his friends. And, I grew into my identity,
Yeah.
right? And so I was known as kind of being a whore.
Yeah.
And a lot of gossip like spread,
Yeah.
not only between, the kids my own age, but like between their parents, because they're like, oh, did you hear this about so-and-so? Or, and then all the moms would talk, and even it would come back around to my mom, you know what I mean? And so it's a very negative heart space to be in when all I really wanted was a friend.
Yeah. I just
Right?
want a friend. Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, like, why am I experiencing all this hurt from the church? Why are they casting me out again, right?
Yeah,
Because of my identity. And so a lot more hurt from that, from the church than my parents.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that.
Yeah, because they also felt like the shame or the pain as well, because, because they're like, well, that's my family.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about my family, so.
Yeah. For me, I feel like it was a little opposite. Like, there was definitely like, because I just didn't like, I learned at a very young age to like whatever was like hurting or disappointing my parents, to like hide that. Like, I learned at a young age very well how to hide. And so I feel like I experienced more of like the pain and the shame of like rejection more so from my parents than I did from the church. I eventually got there with the church, but like for me, it started out from my parents because like I had other issues going on as well. Like, I really struggled with depression and like self-harm when I was younger. And so there was a couple people in the church I did feel comfortable confiding in about that. And then, just like out of the right thing, like pure concern for like, is Joy gonna like kill herself? Is she gonna like, going to ever like come out of this like really dark, deep like depression, like or does she need more help? Like, it eventually got back to my mom, and I remember in particular one Sunday, my mom, like after church, like I don't know who talked to her or what they said, but she was so upset. And we got home and she was like, you don't talk about what's going on in our home outside, and that just pushed me into a darker place, because I'm like, well, there are things happening that I need to like express, like I need to get out, and I feel like I can't here, like within the confines of like my family, and like my family, we didn't talk about a lot of things. Like, it's funny because when I was younger, we had a lot of like family discussions, but it was never about like what was actually happening within our four walls. It was like we'd have family talks about like God or like, but never like things that were happening that were impacting us, right? And so I was just like, I felt bad and I felt shame, because I'm like, now I've shamed like my family. So it just made me withdraw deeper into myself, but it also taught me like, okay, this is also something I need to hide. Like, I'm not going to talk anymore about like what I'm experiencing at home. I'm not going to talk anymore about like the things that I feel like are paining me. I'm just going to like suppress that as well and just like do my best to represent my family well, even though I still felt like I was not doing that. I just was like, I can't do what I've been doing because, clearly like it's embarrassing my family. And I didn't want that because I'm like, okay, if I stop doing that, then maybe like my family will accept me. And like there was a time like around the time that I was just like, I don't want to be involved in the church world anymore. Like I don't want to consider myself a Christian anymore. But like I couldn't not go to church because my family was a family. Like we go to church, like no questions asked. Like you're not staying home, you're not going somewhere else. You're going to church. And so like I learned I put on like the church face. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to church. I'm gonna help. Or I was also dating this guy at the time, and he had a car, so he would like pick me up for church, and then like he knew the time to bring me back, and that was that. And like I would go with him like during church, and I didn't realize till later on like I was going with him to like drop off like weed or like drugs or whatever. Like I just thought we were driving around to meet his friends. Little did I know, But I learned at a young age like I felt that rejection from my parents. So like because I felt that rejection, like later on once I started feeling like rejection from the church, it was just like I feel like not that it didn't affect me as much, but it was just something that it was like, oh, just like another rejection. Like I had become so numb to it. I had become so numb to just like people, like really to everything. Like I was in a very, very apathetic state. Like I was, and I didn't cry. Like I didn't like, even though like I just didn't feel anything until like I fell into just darker times of depression, darker times of hurting myself because I was like, well, like I need to feel something and I don't feel anything except for rejection. And really, I don't even know if I feel that anymore. Like there would have to be something really big that happened that would like get a response out of me. But other than that, I was just like, well, another thing, like here I am. And so it was weird. But there was also like talk about me around the church. People like, oh yeah, that's a girl that's like, super depressed. And again, it made me feel bad because like everyone in my family, like, and within the church, like my dad was like on the praise team, and like my mom was like a children's church teacher, and my brother played the drums, and then there was me, like I guess my identity was depression, like, and then I was just like, oh great, like this, like I'm just getting worse and worse. Like I felt like there was no hope. I was just like, here I am. I guess this is like what I'll be, forever. So yeah, but tell us more of your story. Like,
Stop. No. We're going back. So how do you, I'm the host now. Yeah. I'm asking the question.
It's okay.
But see, how did you get yourself out of that then?
Yeah. I didn't. I didn't. I just like, I fell into a deeper, like, states of depression. But like when I discovered, but like once I got into like drinking, like it's weird because I feel like at points, like there were very key points in my life where I felt like I was making strides spiritually, but then like within my personal life, I felt like I was just like going in a deeper level. So it felt like I remember I went to worship school, great time in my life. The day I moved back to Chicago from worship school is when I met my first girlfriend. It's also around the time, like over the next couple years, like drinking, like going out with my friends all the time and like getting drunk. And like, but also was a time that I was like really growing in the church and like being like really becoming more involved with like the worship ministry and like becoming more involved with like the youth ministry and like really becoming a leader in the youth ministry and like really then beginning to stretch like myself prophetically, but like in my personal life, I was just going like in this like I was going down, like, And I felt like, as far as like coming out of like the depression thing, when I got to worship school, so it was like, I graduated high school, and my dad died my senior year of high school. So I kind of stopped self-harming around that time. Like I still was, but just not as much. And I guess I did find some relief, and I would say I could attribute that to God. And just like him kind of starting to change me and like reach me a little bit, I was a little bit less apathetic. And simply because I am, we were speaking about this before the podcast, but like our church will host these really big youth conferences, 252 conference. And so at one of those conferences, I just remember having kind of like this breakthrough moment. And like, I was there kind of like not expecting anything to change. I was just like, oh, another conference, another time of being in, worship and talking about God. Like, I wasn't expecting anything out of it. And I remember, I don't remember who was preaching. I don't remember what they talked about, but I just remember like at the altar call, I felt so compelled, and I hated going to altar calls. Like I hated anything that I felt like was going to put myself out there. I was like, I don't want to do like, altar call, you got to step forward. And I'm like, oh no, then people are going to see me. Then they're going to know I have a problem. And there's already like so many problems that I have. There's already so much shame. So like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to put myself out there. But I remember I just felt so compelled. I was like, I have to go forward. Like, there was definitely a tug of God in my heart at that time. And I had to be about like 16, 17, maybe 17. Yeah, probably 17. Because this was a summer, I think, before my senior year that I had experienced this. And so I went forward. I remember I had also made like this long like Facebook status about like, I'm going to proclaim my faith. Like, I'm no longer ashamed, or like something, and it was life changing for me, because it was like, I definitely felt a difference. Like I still had struggled with depression some, but not as much. And so I remember having that experience and that God encounter. And it was also one of the first times I like cried in church. Like I remember I would be like in these youth services, everyone's on their knees, like, weeping. And I'm just standing there like, and I don't feel a thing. Like I don't feel the presence of God. I don't even feel a breeze that's in the room. Like I feel nothing, I'm just like, what is going on? And I remember there would be times I would go home and be like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I experience what these people are experiencing? Like, why don't I feel anything? And I think that was also what attributed to me having that season of life where I was like, I don't want to be a Christian anymore, or I don't know if I really believe in God, because I didn't feel God. And because I didn't feel God and I didn't feel anything, I was like, I don't think this is real. And I watch everyone around me have these experiences, but I wasn't experiencing anything. And I was so depressed, and I felt like there were so many things happening that were hurting me that I was like this can't, like, God can't be real. Like, I'm hearing that God is good and he brings peace, and I'm not experiencing any of that. So I'm just like, whatever, like, I don't want a part of that. And also where I went to high school, like, we were all supposed to be Christians, but they were such a specific denomination that believed all these things that were opposite to what I was taught growing up, but we're both supposed to be Christians. That was confusing. So I was like, I'm opting out. But I knew that there was something in me that longed for something deeper. And so I got to this point where I would like leave, like if we started getting into a moment of worship in the youth department at church and like people were experiencing God, I would just leave and I would like go sit on the side steps of the building, and I would just like be like, God, why don't I feel anything? Like, what's wrong with me? And I would even go home and be like, I would try to pray sometimes if I felt like bad enough, whether it was like I felt bad because of porn or I felt bad because of just like the rejection I felt. I would just be like, God, like, why don't I feel you? Like, I want to feel something. And I felt like he wasn't answering. So I was like, whatever. And I like that night at that youth conference, I remember I felt something. And that was the first time in a long time I felt something. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go all in on this. Like, and so I had that breakthrough moment. And so things did change a little bit. Then my dad passed away, and I remember when he passed away, I was terrified of like going back into like being suicidal and back into self-harming. And so I remember I was like crying, and I was telling someone like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. And I don't think they knew what I was saying I didn't want to go back to. But yeah, so all that happened. And then my mom was like, well, if you're going to live in my house, you either work or you go to school. I have no job. So I went to community college. I thought I wanted to be a nurse. I took like one nursing class. And I like left in the middle of that class. I texted my friend. I was like, please come get me. And so I left. And from there, I ended up going to this worship school because I was super into like the music ministry at church. And so that was becoming like, again, I was taking these strides like spiritually or within my church life, but within my personal life, I also felt like I was like going maybe a little deeper, more off the deep end, I should say. So yeah, I was like experiencing these two like very separate things, but I went to this worship school and that really had an impact on me, and that was a healing experience for me, where like I remember they were like, you just need to open up, and like I remember like within the first like couple of weeks of school, like I ended up having this meeting with like the directors of the program, and they were like, we just feel that God wants to purify you. That automatically made me feel seen because I did feel so dirty and shameful because of the porn thing and because of like the feelings I knew I had for women. And so I was like, oh, like that sounded hopeful, like God wants to purify me, but I also couldn't practically see how that was going to happen. And they were also like, yeah, God wants to use you, and you're such a joy and a bright light. And I'm like, like I'm not experiencing any of that. And then they kept telling me like they see that God wanted to heal me and do all these things in me. I wasn't necessarily seeing it, but I did know that I need to be there. Like God spoke to me very clearly about me being there. So I was like, okay, like I okay, like that was just my response. But I wasn't 100% open to it. And there was this point in that while I was in that worship program that I did feel like God was beckoning for me to be more open. And in fact, I think someone did tell me like, you just need to open up to God. And I didn't even know what that meant. Like to me, like being open and available to God was serving. And that's what I knew how to do best. So I was serving at church. I served at the church that I did like the worship program on. I was like on their production team. I was on like the janitorial team that would like clean the church on Saturdays. I like volunteered with the youth ministry. So I was like, this is the best way I know to be open to God. And I remember someone very specifically saying like being open to God is not doing things, but it's spending time with him. And I didn't even know what that looked like really. So that I guess is kind of like when things began to change for me in terms of like getting out of depression and like things like that. But it did not remove like the shame that I felt for like where I was concerned, like I guess you could say like my sexual identity or the struggles I had with lust, the struggles I had with watching porn, and with like knowing that I liked women. I just didn't talk about that in that program because I didn't feel like anyone there could really relate to what I was feeling. So when it was just something like that for the duration of that program, I kind of like suppressed. And then when I got back, like I said, the day I got back, I like met my first girlfriend, and I remember she was like, "Hey, you're Joy," or like something like that, and I didn't even know her, and I'm like, "Yeah, how do you know me?" And then like from there we became friends, and she told me she liked me, and that was the first time that like another, or not the first time, but yeah, kind of like the first time that someone just like openly, like so blatantly, were like told me that they liked me. And then she was also so open about the fact that like she was like, yeah, I'm bi, so like I've been talking to the youth leaders here, and that for me was so strange. I'm like, really? Like, and so there was something in me that was drawn to that, and so I then like we got in a relationship, and I remember feeling like this is wrong, but also like it was something that I wanted to freely explore. Like when I was in high school, it was like, if I see you at school or something surrounding school, then like this is a thing, but it wasn't like a real like relationship. And so that was the first time I was able to like maybe have a more serious relationship on my own with a woman. And so then that's how that kind of like that door opened in my life, which then like led into like me partying, me like smoking weed, and like all these other things. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. No, I think for me, sometimes I like to explain it like an onion because of Shrek.
Yeah.
But
it is. There's so many layers.
There's so many layers to it, right? So like at the deep core, it's like, well, there's loneliness.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
because I'm lonely, I have
Loneliness,
these other
rejection.
layers of, alcoholism and porn addiction. And it seemed like, that I was being healed from a lot of these layers, but for some reason, right, I was saying the hold of porn that it had on me, that's just the one thing that I couldn't shake. And when I eventually came to my breaking point, like low point in my life when I'm like, no, everything that I've been doing isn't working out for me at all.
Yeah.
Like, and I was just literally crying, like day after day after day after day.
How
after
did
day
you
after
get
day.
there to that
How do
point?
I-
Like, what was it? Like, you know how, like, sometimes there's something that happens that you're like, I'm at rock bottom, but then sometimes, like, you just have this realization. But, like, what was it for you? Was it, like, something happened and you were like, this is the lowest I am? Or was it just this realization? Or what was that for you?
I think I was done. I was fed up. I was fed up of trying to find something in someone, in somebody else.
Yeah.
Where it's like, why can't I just love myself, I guess?
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Like, what about me is so terrible?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, I've also struggled with, like, self-harm, right? But, yeah, I think I was at that breaking point where I was like, I was crying, and I was being more open to going to church, and my parents took me, and I was still fighting with my parents and couldn't see eye to eye with them on anything, right? And I was like, okay, God, well, I'm done. I tried this.
Yeah.
I'm over it.
Yeah.
And frankly, like, I can't take anymore. It's just too, like, painful. So, like, just make it clear to me and send me someone that's going to be it, because I can't do this, you know, thing of this hope of having maybe someone in my life that I could spend forever with, and then not be for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's when I started really coming back to faith.
Okay.
In seeing someone that I could spend the rest of my life with.
Okay.
And then me wanting to change myself, not like in a bad way, but like bettering myself, because you can't always expect someone to be whatever you want for you, right? You have to also be at a place where you can give this to another person. Like people are always in a relationship for what they can get out of it, right? When they're not even ready to be the same exact person to, whoever you're with.
That's also like a very mature way of thinking, because no one, like, I don't want to say no one, it is not very common to think about what you can also give. Most people are like, okay, what can I get? I need this, this, and this in a person. And that's the only focus. So the fact that you were also like, well, what can I give? Like, that's a leap. That's amazing.
Well, I'm married and I have 2 kids. No, but so I recently saw this video, like on take Facebook or whatever, right? That was
Facegram.
I was like, write down a list of everything that you want in a partner.
Yeah.
And like, this person's like writing down, like, list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And this person goes to say, okay, now go be those things. It's like you're
so hard.
Your expectation of who this other person is so high, yet you're unwilling to be able to also be that person. When a relationship is both ways, it's not one way.
Give and take. It's not one way.
Yeah.
But going back a bit, like you talked about how like you were addicted to porn for 20 years. Like, what was the point in which you got free? Like,
so
talk about that.
So I was at a point where I was more open to God. I wanted to come back because I found that God is the only person that's gonna love me. And even
question within the question.
Yeah.
How did you get there where you realized God is the only person that's gonna love me? Like, what drew you to God? What drew you to faith? Like, I know you said like, okay, you were just like fed up with like thinking that like, like there's nothing for you. So like, what was it in you that like was like, well, maybe God has something for you. Maybe not for you, but for me. Like, what was it in you that was like, okay, I'm going to give God a chance because maybe this can actually work?
Yeah. And I think that's getting to the atmosphere, right? My parents were like bringing me to church, even though I didn't want to go to church. And it's like, well, just 1, being in the presence of God, 2, hearing the word of God. And it's like, okay, this is what God says about me. I think I'm terrible, low life, good for nothing.
Low life.
POS, right?
Yeah.
But God says I'm wonderfully made. God says I knew you before you were born.
Yeah.
God says you're light of the world. God says yada yada. All these wonderful things about me. This one's killer that I love. That God says about things that aren't. I know that's a huge paraphrase, but basically like things that were dead, God calls to life, or like whatever. He can speak things into being, even though they aren't existing currently. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, got nothing to lose, right? And so I think that's what drawed me to a personal relationship, to love. in coming back and just surrounding myself in that space and really just coming after him, because it's like, well, you know, after everything I've been through, God's the only one that's been there for me. I can't rely on anyone else. And even in like, you know, a marriage space, it's like, well, no one is 100% perfect, right? So you can't like, you know, you still have to come back to God, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. You know, I leaped into, you know, Christian community and serving with the church. And it was hard because it was like I was so addicted to porn. I still had the temptation, and it was something that would never go away. And it feels like, right, you're praying for this, and it's like, why is this the one thing? The one thing that I'm beat about, and no one else knows, because you can easily hide it, right?
Yeah, true. Because everyone looks at you like, oh, that's Fiona, but they don't know, like,
they don't know.
Fiona was up all night watching porn.
Stop.
But like, how was it also like re-entering like faith community and being around like the church and like church people, like when previously you were very rejected by them? Like, did you have a fear or anxiety about that? Was it easy to jump in with like, okay, I'm kind of open to God? Like you said, you had to be there because your parents took you, but like you said, you started to get involved. Like, do you have any like, I don't know, like fear or hesitancy doing that?
Absolutely, all the time. So I'm a big introvert, and so like,
Same. I think that's why we're friends.
like, what am I even doing on a podcast talking right now about what I do at night?
Me,
really, yeah. But yeah, I think I'm just thankful that the timing was perfect and the community was right, because we were just talking about this again before the podcast. But when I come back around to church, you know, I just happened to find a church community that was so loving, that accepted me. Yeah, friends, exactly. That just accept you as you are. And like, I have no doubt 100%. Like, I mean, Joy knows, right, that I'm gay, but I have no doubt in my mind. I already know the support that, you know, our community has for her, that they also love me the same. So there's definitely a Christian community out there.
Bless. Yeah, that's very true. It's like when you're in a state of thinking like no one is going to accept you. Like, I remember when I had stopped going to church for a while. Well, I couldn't go because I was in a car accident. But then when I started going again, I went to a totally different church. I remember I was just expecting for them to reject me based on what I look like, because at that time I definitely had started just presenting more masculinely. And I also knew I like smelled like weed most of the time when I walked into that church, or like the party I went to the night before. And so I remember I was expecting for them to immediately reject me. And the thing that like, because that was a time in my life where I wasn't hiding my sexuality anymore. I wasn't hiding like who I was. I was just like, this is who I am and what I am. And I had found people at that time outside of church that accepted me. And there was a time like when I started partying and drinking and things like that, like, and the girl that I had started dating, like, actually she went to my church. So like I had found like a community within my church who like, we were all like we were all homosexual. Like we were all like, so it was just like, we found our niche fit, like, right. And so we bonded because we're in the church and we are kind of like, you know, we all have like the same thing tied essentially. And so like, it was nice to have that at that time. But then like when I wasn't there anymore and I was stepping into a new community, it was so good to have that, like, where people like, they just loved me immediately. Like, I remember I would like not go to church for like 3 weeks and I would show up and they were like, hey, we missed you. And I'm like, me? Like, I didn't even know if you noticed me, you know? And so that is, I think, the biggest thing. And I'm so glad that there are places of community, like churches and places of community where people can go and like, no matter what you look like, no matter what, like, people will love on you and like accept you, because that's what God called us to. Like, unfortunately, there are still a lot of places where you go and like people like, they just take one look at you and they're like, you know, you need the Lord. Or like, they'll immediately like think that you don't know God or you don't have this close relationship with him because of what you look like, you know, or because of how you present. And it's like, I remember the time that I was going to that church, I was like, man, like, I was so desperate, like, at that point for change. Like, I was so desperate for God. I guess I didn't realize I was desperate for God. I just thought I was looking for change, like, you know, but I mean, being desperate for God is in a way being desperate to be changed. But I was so grateful to have like community. And like, I know that's an immediate game changer. Somebody said earlier, reminded me of this Bible verse when you were talking about like the things that God says. And it's 1 Corinthians 1:27. Instead, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise, and he chose things that are powerless to shame those who are powerful. God chose things despised by the world, things counted as nothing at all, and used them to bring to nothing what the world considers important. As a result, no one can ever boast in the presence of God. God has united you with Christ Jesus for our benefit. God made him to be wisdom itself. Christ made us right with God. He made us pure and holy and freed us from sin. Therefore, as the scripture says, if you want to boast, boast only about the Lord. But it's the first part of that when you were like, God says like these things, and like he does talk about like how he'll take what's like lowly and like what people just cast off, and like he uses that. And I think I talked about it in one of the episodes. It's like, if you feel like you're too bad or like you have nothing to offer, like you are the ideal candidate to God, like that, because that's what he's going for. Like it's the whole idea of like he left the 99 for the one, like, you know what I mean? Like that one that's cast off, that's one that's like just gone off astray. Like he'll leave everything else to go and find that one. And how many times like are we that one, like you and I feeling like that one that's like everyone else is kind of like cast us off, but God came after us, you know? You saying that reminded me of that. And it's so nice, like, to be able to identify with that scripture. Like, I remember the first time I heard that, and, like, I heard it in, someone was using it in a sermon. They didn't even read the whole verse, but I remember I went and found it because I was like, oh, that sounds like me, you know? So you were in this faith community, and you felt like porn was this one thing that you could not get over. How did you get over it?
Yeah, and, you know, well, part one, the big change in my life was no longer identifying with whatever I thought I was or whatever other people said about me, but what God identified me as.
That's so good.
And that is super beautiful verse. Love that. Thank you for sharing that. And so because of, again, surrounding myself in a Christian environment and knowing who God is, knowing what he says about me, I fell in love with him, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm doing all these things, seeking after his heart and building his church. And, you know, in doing all these things, you become more like Christ, where you're not worried about, all these little things about me that are imperfect anymore, because it doesn't matter. So God loves me. And so I'm focusing on him. And I remember growing up one time in high school, I remember one of my pastors was saying, like, don't worry about all like the things that you're not supposed to do. Because sometimes Christianity can be like, don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
But focus on what you can do. You can become more like Christ. You can fall more in love with Christ.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really got into. I'm pretty sure you spoke on this before in one of your sessions. And so that's what I did. I didn't focus about my shortcomings.
Yeah.
I just leaned into God, trusted in God, and believed that he would take care of the rest. That doesn't mean that I didn't do anything at all.
Yeah.
Right? So here's the funny thing, right? I thought it was the one thing that I couldn't shake. And I read about it, I heard about it, that a lot of people that have porn addiction become free when they start reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of Christians, but they don't read the Bible, right?
Like, real talk. I hate this is true. I'm going to look at, after I say this, I should probably look it up before I say this. In another episode, I'll come back with like the actual stat. But I'm pretty sure probably like, I want to say like a lesser number, but I bet you like 1% of Christians read the Bible. Or people that claim to be Christians. Because not everyone that says they're Christian is a Christian, right? But definitely like, probably like, you know, I'll give it some more room. Maybe like 4 or 5%, but it's a very low number. Like it's like the number of like tithing, the percentage of tithing. Like very low percentage of people actually tithe, but like very, very low percentage of people actually read the Bible. But reading the Bible is so key to like being free, and even if you don't have like a specific thing that you're addicted to, like maybe you just feel bound as a person, reading the Bible, game changer. If you have not read the Bible, read it. If you need a Bible, let me know. I'll find a way to get you a Bible. But like, that's definitely a game changer.
Yeah, but I read the Bible. I started reading the Bible every single day.
Come on, yeah, that's good.
And I have never looked back.
Wow.
Like, didn't even have the want or temptation.
Wow.
Like, I'm saying, like, porn had a hold on me, sure,
Yeah.
and like being homosexual, like having tendencies to want women was something that I couldn't shake for, like, since I was a kid.
Yeah,
like, I'm saying, like, I don't need any of that because I just have God.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I definitely know, like, that was a turning point for me as well. Like, not initially reading the Bible. Like, I would read it, and then I would like not read the Bible for like months, sometimes years, and then I'd be like, I need to read the Bible. Then I would get into a flow. But that was definitely the turning point for me as well. For me, I never like, as far as my sexuality is, my sexuality never became my identity. Like, and a lot, like you said in the beginning, like a lot of people attach their identity to their sexuality. And so even there were times that people I dated, they were like, how do you identify? And I'm like, I'm Joy. And they're like, yeah, but like, are you gay? Are you bi? Are you a lesbian? And I would just say, I love people. I mean, cause it's true. I do. And they were like, so you're a pan? And I'm like, no, I'm a people lover. Like, I just love who, like, and that's true about me. Like I'm super into getting to know who a person is. Like, I could care less. Like, I'm never looking for like, I'm only going to talk to you if you're a lesbian. I'm only going to talk to you if you're gay. Like, and that was never attached to my identity. I never felt the need to put myself in a box. And so like that for me, it was kind of like, I don't want to say easy, but it was kind of easy to like not make that the focal point. Like, but for a long time it was. I remember I would just think like, I would think that everything would be better if God could fix like how I felt about women, or everything would be better if I could stop watching porn. And I remember when I stopped watching porn, it was definitely a thing where instead of focusing so much on stopping watching porn, I was just like, I'm just gonna like put this, like, it sounds super simple to say, but it was true. Like, I just made this heart and mind decision, like, I'm going to put this in God's hands. Like, and similar to what I've talked about with smoking, instead of me trying to be like, I don't want to do this anymore, God help me, I was just like, I don't know what to do with this because I can't stop. So I just made this conscious decision to be like, I'm just going to like not worry about this, but I'm going to worry about getting closer to God. And I didn't even like make this connection until you said it, but funnily enough, it was also at a time where I had decided to start spending time to reading my Bible and praying. And I was like, I'm going to just make a conscious effort. I know that I'm not a super consistent person. So I knew I would never be the person that's like, every day I'm going to read my Bible and spend like this 10, 15 minutes, 20, 30 minutes with God, right? But I knew that if I had in my heart and mind made this conscious decision to every day at some point acknowledge God and like make some type of space for him, whether it was like just 5 minutes of listening to a worship song or it was 30, 40 minutes of like reading my Bible and praying, that like I knew that I could commit to that. So I didn't try to like lock myself into like this, like, I'm going to read my Bible every day. Like, I commend you for that. I just don't have that in me. Like, I'm the least consistent person you'll ever meet. So I remember I had like made that conscious decision and like things just began to change. And like you said, like the desire like left me where I would normally like feel this urge. I was just like, no. And then that became easier because then when I did feel like the temptation, it was easy for me to kind of like turn it off in my mind. And like in the beginning, there were times where I would like not watch porn for like a few months. And then I would like do it one day. And then like one day it turned into a week. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to start over. But then I was easier to take the pressure off of myself because it wasn't my focus anymore to stop. That I was just like, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to start again tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to be like, right now is the moment I need to be better. I'm going to start again tomorrow. I'm just going to be intentional again tomorrow. And I remember one time I had like stopped for like maybe like a year. And like one day I watched porn and then I watched porn for like 3 weeks. And then I was like, okay, nope, we're going to start over again. But I had to be okay with also like falling and like or failing in that, and just like being like, okay, I struggled with this, I messed up, and instead of having this like moment where I feel like totally like doomed and shamed, even though I would feel shame, like I didn't focus on the shame. I just focused on God, and I focused on like knowing that he could bring me out of it and through it. And it also helped to know that like the one time I messed up, and again, I came to this knowledge by reading my Bible and spending time with God and getting to know who God was. I knew that if I messed up, that did not mean that God was mad at me, that I knew that he still loved me and that he still wanted me. And so when I came to that point, I was like, oh, this is actually okay. Like, I don't have to feel like this super bout of shame that would kind of push me deeper into it. So if I mess up, I was like, okay, I know that God still loves me. I'm sorry, and I'm going to start again tomorrow. And that was that. And I took a similar approach to like my attraction to women. Like after I dated that one girl, I pretty much just then started exclusively like dating women. And like I guess that's also probably people thought it was weird that I was like, I just like people. And I'm like, me only dates women. I like people though. And it just like, it for a long time was a point that made me feel like, because of like my background in the church, that like God didn't love me. And for a long time, I think that's also what pushed me to like not go to church for a while once I couldn't go anymore, was because I had felt like, I don't belong in church anyway. Like God doesn't love me. And I remember one day I was in my car, and I think I was high, like when I had this realization, but it was almost like I had this like out of body experience where I just like saw myself not within myself, if that makes sense. And I just remember like seeing how I was living. It was like I had like this flashback moment, but like I was watching myself like, almost as, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just like this really like reality check moment where I like saw myself and how I was living and what I was doing. And I just had these realizations of like, it was just very strong thought and like sober-mindedness in me that realized like, I feel like God doesn't love me. And because I feel like God doesn't love me, I feel like I don't belong. And I feel rejected from like my church community. But I also feel like I'm on the run, and like, so to speak. Like, I just felt like I'm running from something, and I'm running really from God because I feel like he doesn't love me. But I knew deep down inside that I loved God. And so I was like, oh, this pain point, I feel like maybe is a better way to describe it. I felt like so in pain, and I couldn't figure out what was causing it. But I knew I was miserable. Like I would go home every night and like cry, or I couldn't fall asleep. And I was like, oh, like I feel this big rejection and this big pain point, and I feel like I'm on the run for something because I think that God doesn't love me. And I had this realization that like God does love me. And I was trying to like think like, but why do I think this? And then I linked it to like, oh, I think this because of my sexuality. Like I think this because I know that I like women, and I know that the church thinks that's wrong because they say God thinks that's wrong. And if God thinks that's wrong, that means that God doesn't love me. And then like when I realized, like when I did that math, I was like, 2 + 2 is not equaling 4 right now. I was like, this is not really it. And so I remember thinking that, and I was like, I'm just going to like not focus on the fact that God doesn't love me, and focus on the fact that I love God, and that I want to like please God with my life. And like that, like I did not like immediately stop dating women. Like I had a girlfriend when I was having this realization, and we didn't like, it wasn't this thing, and then we broke up the next day. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, eventually we broke up, but then I like dated a few other like women, like, but I knew deep down inside that like my aim was to please God. So even when I would get into different relationships, there was something in me that knew like this is not pleasing to God. And it wasn't like, I wasn't like, oh no, I can't do this because then I'm going to go to hell. But I would definitely always feel this little bit of being unsettled because I knew I was doing something that wasn't pleasing. And so it wasn't about like, not doing something out of obligation because I needed to follow the rules, but I loved God so much that I wanted to please him. So I kind of always deep down knew like, I don't think I'm going to stick in this because I want to live a life that's pleasing. I know based off of what I've read that like I can't please God and like live this life. And so it just became something that like I used to steal. I used to, again, smoke weed. I used to watch porn. That like I can't do these things and please God at the same time. And instead of seeing this as like, this is who I am and I need to change, or like being mad at God for how he made me, I'm like, this is just another thing that I have to lay down. And this is something that, and like, I know it's not going to be easy. Like, and it doesn't mean that like, I'm laying this down, so I'm never going to like women anymore. Like, I still like, you know, that's still in me, but it's something that I'm like, I'm not necessarily going to engage with that. Like, sometimes I still have the urge to, when I go in a store, like, just take something. I'm like, I could pay for this or I could put this in my pocket, but I'm going to be pleasing to God, so I'm not going to steal. I sometimes still have the urge to smoke weed. I'm not going to smoke weed because that's something I decided to lay down for God. Like, and so, like, I mean, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, like watching porn right now would probably be great. I'm not going to do that because I want to please God. And it's just like, the Bible talks about like, right, picking up your cross and following Jesus, or like laying down your life. The only way to find life is to lose it. So that was like my process of, I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to focus on all the things, like you said, that are like pushing me away, or the things that are what I would consider disqualifiers. And also the Bible talks about how God qualifies the called, right? And so I was like, I'm not going to try to like pretend to be something that is qualified to be a part of like the church or like the kingdom of God. I'm just going to focus on my love for God, and I'm just going to run with that. And my thought process was like, anything that does not align with that will eventually fall off. It will. Like, the more I get to know God, the more I become like him, the more the things that are not like him are going to leave me. And so I was just like, I'm going to go that way because that gave me so much peace. And everything else was like dependent on me changing. And I also had this realization that I cannot change. I've tried. I cannot change. I've tried to, just like, find a way to like just not watch porn. I've tried to find a way to like not smoke weed. I've tried to find a way to not steal. I've tried to find a way to like deny that I like women, but it's like none of those things work. Nothing I did with my power, with everything. Like, when I'm trying to do something, I'll give it everything I have. And nothing, like, no matter how hard I tried, worked. So I knew that I couldn't change, but I knew that God could change me. And I just knew that I had to be willing to be changed also. Like, and I think a lot of times, like, people want both. Like, they want their way and God's way. And I, like, had to have this realization. It's like, if I'm going to choose God, like, I have to be committed to God's way, which means I have to give up my way. And it's not always easy. There are times I try to, like, go back to my way. And then I'm like, that's not, like, once I had a real taste of God and his life-changing power, I was like, this sucks. Like, my way sucks. Like, when I try to go back to it, I'm like, oh, actually, I don't want this. This is miserable. Let me just, like, go with God. I relate to that.
Amen.
Like, when you just get to know his word, when you get to know who God is, it's like, everything else, it's like when you have really good food and then you go back to eating bland food, it's like, where's the salt? Like,
where's the sauce?
Where's the flavor?
Some seasoning.
Yeah. But thank you for sharing your story, and like, also just thank you for opening the door for me to like also soberly have this conversation.
Yeah,
like,
it was a talk that was
True.
That was coming. So
was that your plan to just set me up to tell more of my story? No,
I know,
just
that's
kidding.
why I'm the secret host now. That's my show.
Actually, it's just going to be Joy and Fiona in the morning.
We have to find a new theme song.
True. Fiona, Joy, Fiona, Joy.
Because your name is just so perfect. So,
but like, no, honestly, thank you for your vulnerability and like, and in your timeliness in this. Literally, I've been thinking about it the last 2 weeks. I was like, man, I think I just need to like, I've touched on it, but I haven't like just openly talked about like that part of my life and like that part of my story and my testimony. It's just been like mentioned here and there. And so I was like, I don't know, I was like, I don't know how that conversation is going to unfold. And I definitely prayed. I was like, well, God, like, you make a way. Then he said, Fiona.
Really, when it comes to this, yeah, you're my girl.
So thank you for sharing. Is there anything that you would like to share, like last thoughts with anyone or someone that may be struggling, like how you were, with like rejection, or feeling like because of, whoever they're attracted to, whether you're a guy attracted to men, a woman attracted to women, or like whatever your sexual orientation is, that you feel like is disqualifying you? Like, what would you say to that person if they're like on the fence? Like maybe they want to be a person of faith, but they feel like they're too, I don't know, dirty or too shameful for God to use. Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that there's hope, and that's in Jesus Christ. And there's no other way, there's no other thing that's going to fill that gap in your heart that you're trying to fill. But I believe 100% that God saves and God's able. So it doesn't matter whatever you're going through. If you make room for God and give it to Him, that He'll take care of the rest. But I think most importantly is, if you want real change in your life, is to seek God wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Just seek a relationship with Him. Just know who He is. Know who this man that we speak about, Jesus, this God that we speak about. And once you know Him, it's not outlandish at all. I know Christians can be some weird, crazy people with what they believe and stuff. But I'm here for the crazy and weird. Like, if He can save me from addiction in one day, right? After 20 years of struggling, I'm here for it, because at the end of the day, it's like He calls us all these wonderful things. He says all these wonderful things about us, and He wants us to have a good life, a successful life. And that's what it says in His word. And I just, again, want to speak hope and life into whatever your relationship situation is, because I 100% would not see myself as being married with 2 kids, living a happy life, and just being so in love, because I've suffered and been through it all, just heartache and pain and abuse and trying to figure it out. And it got really, really messy. But God 100% restores. He restored my family life, my relationship with my parents. Didn't see that one ever coming, again, with our differences. And it's just so wonderful, this family that God has given me, that we can all gather together. And it's such a blessing, because I feel like for a lot of people, they feel like, I'm not good enough to be in a relationship. I'm not at the space where I can give, or who wants to bring kids into the world, because I can't raise kids either. Or there's so many reasons that you might think that you're not ready, you're not good enough for. But God says that family is where His heart is. And so if you have this feeling that you don't belong, God will put you in a space where you feel welcome, where you feel like you belong, whether that's in the church, but also in an actual family, in marriage, and having kids, and restoration with your parents, no matter how much you disagree with, because it's the ability to love each other unconditionally, whether that's blood or not blood. That's what Jesus really is all about. And that's why He goes and seeks the ones that people have outcasts. And He says, no, you're loved. I love you. And so, once we experience this wonderful love of God, we're able to share that love with all the people around us. And that's honestly what Christianity is all about.
That's so good. I'm getting emotional. Amen.
Amen.
That's so good. That's the truth. Thank you so much for listening. That concludes this episode of Joy in the Morning podcast. I hope this was helpful or a blessing to you. If it was, please share with someone that this conversation could also be helpful to. Remember to follow and rate on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also remember to follow at Joy in the Morning Pod on Instagram. See you in the next episode on June 7th.
Yeah.